Okay, great. My name is Janice Courtcamp Fearing. I go by Jan Fearing. I am the housewife who went to Syria. And I wanted to share with you about that adventure that I had this evening. So I really appreciate you coming out and spending your evening here with me. And you know, it's rare that you get to show your travel photos to a group of strangers. So that's what we're doing. I just wanted to introduce myself and how I ended up going to Syria, and that's a little bit of a story in itself. I am just a housewife. I work part-time at our church as the children's minister there. And about 4 years ago, as the Arab Spring was happening, I had a sense that there was something fishy about it. It seemed to be, honestly, too good to be true. And I decided, since I had some time, that it was a good time to actually do some research about the Middle East and try to figure out a little bit of what was going on there. So I just launched in, and I just watched every article coming through about the Arab Spring, etc. And then, you know, Libya happened, and Colonel Gaddafi was killed, and the next country on the list for getting freedom and democracy was to be Syria. And if you believed what you were seeing in the media, on the news at night, you would have probably the impression I had that at any moment this man who must be hunkered in a bunker somewhere was going to be pulled out, drug out into the public square and eviscerated by the freedom fighters and hung up by his entrails, and a new dawn would come to Syria and freedom and democracy would reign where an evil, brutal tyrant had been in place before. And up until that moment, I believed all that. But as I was researching, I came across a link to an interview that he had given with RT. This was November of 2012. He gave an interview in the end of September of that year. And I thought, this is intriguing. You know, I didn't think this brutal tyrant would do an interview, but I decided to watch at least a few minutes to see this man justify these actions that he had been accused of. So I started watching the interview, and you could have knocked me over with a feather, because the man was calm. He was obviously very intelligent, well-educated. He speaks English very well. What really struck me, though, was how a reporter would ask him a question. He would very carefully listen to the question and equally carefully answer the question. And when he answered the question, he answered in such a way that I could understand what he was talking about. I could hear his side of the story. But also he spoke in a way that was very precise. There were things that came out in that interview that were things that you could latch onto and research and see. Is this the truth or is this not the truth? Over the course of that interview, he also said something else that intrigued me. He said, anybody can be president in Syria. I'm Syrian. I was born in Syria. I will die in Syria. And when he said that, I was thinking, now, what's so special about Syria? I had no knowledge of the country whatsoever. I might have been able to pick it out on a map, but that was about it. And so I became intrigued at that point to not only understand the situation, but to understand, and the crisis, but to understand Syria as a nation as well. What was it like? So I researched not only the war, but also the culture, the history, the people groups, the food, the arts, everything. But a real turning point came when I realized that for the first time in human history, I, as a person sitting in my home, could literally reach out to people in a war zone and talk to them real time, thanks to Facebook. Until that moment, I had avoided Facebook like the plague. But when I realized that and saw how many Syrians were online who spoke English, I thought this was an unprecedented opportunity to get the story from the ground. So I literally, from that time on, spent hours and hours and hours every single day. That was almost 4 years ago now. So I've put in thousands of hours of research from sources all over the world, both mainstream media, alternate media, government sources, you name it. But at the same time, I've been communicating with Syrians, both Syrians living in Syria and Syrians living outside of their country. And something happened to me. The more I learned about Syria, the more I liked it. And then I loved it. And then I really loved it. And I just kind of fell in love with it as a country. At the same time, these connections that I was making online through Facebook were developing into real friendships. And we would spend time together on Skype or phone calls. And there were many hours I've spent literally on the phone with somebody or chatting with somebody, and mortars are falling around their homes, and they're petrified. And they were just so thankful to have somebody spend some time with them and distract them and cheer them on. And so those friendships got very, very deep very quickly. So all of this kind of came together and created this pull. And I just felt like I had to go. It got to the point where I couldn't not go. I wanted to see my friends, and I wanted to see Syria for itself, and I wanted to see if what I had come to believe about the situation there was in fact true to the reality on the ground. So those were my motivations for going. And I want to say thank you to my husband, Sid, who over the course of this has not only tracked with me through this entire thing. He knows as much about Syria as I do. He's as passionate as I am. But he made it possible for me to go, and he sent me with his blessing. He said he felt total peace about me going. So I owe him everything, and he makes my life worth living, even without Syria. So just quickly before I start the slideshow, what had happened was I had made connections in Syria, and I felt fairly assured that I would be able to get a visa to get into the country. But I was attempting something unique. What I was trying to do was to be the first American tourist to enter Syria since the war began. And in the words of the guy at the Syrian embassy in Kuwait, he said the only other Americans who have tried to do this have been spies or terrorists. So I started the process early on. They vetted me for quite a while, and I felt I had gotten some assurance that I would be allowed in. There are no restrictions about Americans going to Syria. I didn't violate any home rule here to go. So I flew into Kuwait, where I had Syrian friends there, and they hosted me beautifully, as Syrians do. And I waited for 4 very long weeks. And at the end of 4 weeks, I was 3 days from flying back home thinking I had failed, because my situation was so unique, and at that time there was a lot of extra things going on in Syria, the parliamentary elections, the peace talks. The government was busy with the war and all of those things. And I thought that I might not get in. And so I'm sitting next to my host in Kuwait, and we're watching Lebanese television. And who should pop up on Lebanese television but my friend and Senator Richard Black, who's here tonight. And so welcome, Senator Black. So I was like, you know, my savior has shown up. And I texted him, and I said, help, help, I'm stuck in Kuwait. You know, I'm waiting in Kuwait. And in spite of the most intense schedule that you must have had at your time in Syria, you made time to talk to the officials in Syria, getting to the highest levels. And next thing I know, the Syrian government has called the embassy in Kuwait and said, get this woman in. I got the visa that day, and I flew out from Kuwait City the next day to fly into Damascus. So I get to Damascus airport, and after a wonderful professional flight, very full flight, and I'm by myself, and I don't speak Arabic. I have a few words of Arabic. But I go up to the immigration counter, and the guy behind the counter is pretty stern, and he's trying to figure out what the heck is this woman doing here in Syria. Just showed up on their doorstep, basically. And he looked up at me and said, "What is your occupation?" And I kind of wasn't prepared for that, and I just looked at him. I was so happy to be there, and I gave him a big smile, and I said, "I'm a housewife." And he smiled back. It was like he just saw my heart in a moment. He called over Mr. Mohammed, who spoke better English than he did. Mr. Mohammed got me to the front of the line to get my luggage. I mean, the plane was packed, and these people were carrying so much luggage. He got me to the front, he got me my bags, he got me through security, he got me through customs, and he deposited me with my friends waiting for me outside of airport security. And so we walked out of the airport, and this is, oh, I'll tell you about that one. This is the picture. I was so excited to get there. But I'm going to back up here for a second. Sorry, this is a new book. It's a new laptop. I can't go back. I was going to show you the map, but we'll see maps later. So I'm in Damascus, and the guy who picked me up, my friend, is a Sunni Muslim. He takes me to my hotel, good friend, takes me to my hotel, and we're met by an Alawite, another friend. So it's me, this Christian, with this Sunni guy and this Alawite guy, and they say, "You've got a few minutes to freshen up, and then we're going." So I said, okay. So in a few minutes, we got in a taxi, and we were deposited on the outskirts of Old Damascus. Damascus as a city is very modern, but in the heart is the ancient city. And Damascus is known as the oldest continuously inhabited capital city in the world. Its history goes back thousands of years, and you can feel every one of those years when you're on these back streets. Mark Twain visited and said, "Damascus measures time not by days and months and years, but by the empire she has seen rise and prosper and crumble into ruin. She is a type of immortality." And I agree. The first thing you see when you get into the old city, it's a bad photograph, but this is the marketplace. It's called the souk. And this is just one avenue of it. This thing is like a small city within the city. And there's just these street after street and little alleyways that go off of it. It's all covered like that. One stall after another of herbs and spices and crafts and textiles and clothing. And there's this human river that is just forever flowing through it. Spectacular place. We walked through the souk and walked through some streets, and we ended up on this street. And my friend Kusei goes, "Do you know where you are?" And I wanted to prove that I had done my homework. I said, "I'm on the street called Straight." And he said, "Yes, you're right." Straight Street, of course, is famous in the Bible, where the Apostle Paul became a Christian. And it's right down from where this picture is. This isn't one of my pictures. I didn't get a good picture of Straight Street. But I'm perched on one of those remains of a Roman column. And it just so happens to be Friday, but it's Good Friday for the Eastern Orthodox Church. And we had walked for a ways and got to a public square. And it's sundown at this point. The air is pink. It's gorgeous. There's life everywhere. There's bars, cafes, shops, people coming and going. And I'm sitting on the column because the air is full of music. And it's the sound of the nearby church choir singing praises on Good Friday. And it was just a poignant moment for me because, again, with my Sunni friend, my Alawite friend, I'm there. And we're just all enjoying this time. And they made It's a beautiful moment. Everywhere in old Damascus, everywhere around Syria, as a matter of fact, there are mosques and churches and all kinds of places of worship like that. We went from hearing the music to going to one of the old cafes in old Damascus, where people gather and they're all smoking the hookahs. I don't know if you can see them, but the air is filled with the smoke of the hookah and conversation and people laughing. And we had a great dinner. Syrian food is fabulous. At the end of the night, we ended up in another cafe, and this was cool because they all look like scenes out of Casablanca. You know, they all look like Rick's cafes, but they're real. And the place was full, everybody smoking, everybody drinking a little bit, and the musicians started. And they started playing these beautiful Arabic love songs, and everybody's like, whoa, and they're all singing, you know. And they launch into some patriotic songs about the army and Bashar. And everybody's like, yes, Bashar, you know, and they're singing and they're dancing and they're pulling me up out of my chair to dance. And it was just like out of Casablanca when they sing the Marseillaise, you know, in front of the Nazis. There was just such a spirit in that room because I knew each and every person in that room had lost a loved one in war. They had all suffered through this war. And the intensity of the passion in that room, I will never forget. It was a fabulous first day in Syria. In case you think I was roughing it in the war zone over there, I stayed at a beautiful 5-star hotel in Old Damascus. It's an Old Damascus home that's been renovated. This is a typical breakfast that you get in the courtyard down below. You got yogurt and olives and fresh vegetables and the spice called za'atar that you dip your bread in. That's fabulous. So that's, you know, I was not roughing it there. I just wanted to show you some scenes from Damascus so you can get a feel for Syria, because one of the things that I'm hoping to do tonight is to show you how unique Syria is as a country. And the best way to do that is through these pictures. There are craftsmen everywhere. This guy was a woodworker. And this is from a shop in the souk where they've specialized in textiles and a very special craft that they do, which is wood and shell inlay. The furniture, boxes, I have an example over there that you can look at later. It's a chessboard. It's just exquisite, detailed. A piece like that chessboard is all hand done, and that would take about 4 months. And this whole set of furniture was like that. Outrageous. All over Syria and in Damascus especially, there are beautiful gardens. It's a beautiful city. This was a garden. That's the old citadel of the city. Oh. Now this is, I have entered into the Umayyad Mosque. The Umayyad Mosque is the Grand Mosque of Syria. It began as a pagan temple, became a Christian church, and then became a mosque. Still in that mosque is the Jesus minaret. The tomb of John the Baptist is in the mosque. And what they teach at that mosque, I've heard some of the preaching there. You know, a lot of it boils down to love God and love other people. It's really it's a place of beauty and peace. It's a spectacular architecture. I felt so comfortable and so welcome. They took me into all kinds of little back ways around there. And at one point, I was very surprised. They even invited me to go in where the men were praying, which I declined just out of respect. But everybody's smiling, very welcoming.